Hey guys, tonight we're going to slow things down and sit with a story that matters. Meet Marcus Jackson, a man in his mid-30s, steady as an oak, whose quiet trip to a grocery store becomes a battleground for her dignity. In a small Indiana town where prejudice lurks beneath polite smiles, Marcus faces a venomous outburst that tests his resolve. His response, rooted in grace and truth, will leave you speechless. Before we begin, please like the video and subscribe, but only if stories like this truly move you. Comment your city and the time you're watching. Now close your eyes or don't, it's your choice. Either way, you're about to witness something real. The air in Harper's Market hums with the soft clatter of carts and the faint beep of scanners. It's a Saturday afternoon in Westfield, Indiana, a town of tidy lawns and pickup trucks where the grocery store serves as a crossroads for the community. Marcus Jackson weaves through the aisles, his worn sneakers silent on the linoleum. At 35, he carries himself with a quiet confidence, his broad shoulders relaxed, his dark eyes scanning the shelves for canned tomatoes. His faded denim jacket hangs loose, and a grocery list scribbled in his mother's neat handwriting peeks from his pocket. The list is a tether to routine, a reminder of the chili simmering in his mind for tonight's dinner with his parents. Marcus pauses by the produce section, the scent of fresh apples mingling with the sterile tang of floor cleaner. He reaches for a can on a high shelf, his fingers brushing the cool metal, when a voice slices through the hum of the store. "You don't belong here." The words are sharp, deliberate spat from the lips of an elderly woman standing a few feet away. Evelyn Harper, in her late 70s, clutches a mesh bag of oranges, her silver hair pinned tightly, her cardigan buttoned to the chin. Her eyes, narrowed behind wire-rimmed glasses, bore into Marcus with a disdain that feels like a physical weight. The store falters. A young mother pushing a stroller freezes her toddler's babble fading. An older man by the bananas glances up, his hand hovering over a bunch. The air thickens, charged with the sudden weight of attention. Marcus's hand pauses mid-reach, the can forgotten. His jaw tightens, a faint pulse flickering at his temple, but his face remains unreadable. Evelyn's lips curl, her voice rising. "Go back where you came from." The words land in like a slap, raw and racial, stripping Marcus of his place in this ordinary moment. Whispers ripple through the crowd, some shocked, some curious, none daring to intervene. Marcus lowers his hand slowly, the grocery list crinkling in his pocket. His eyes meet Evelyn's, not with anger, but with a searching intensity, as if weighing the cost of her words. "Ma'am," he says, his voice low, steady, "you don't know me." The simplicity of his response hangs in the air, a quiet defiance that unsettles her. Evelyn huffs, adjusting her glasses, her stance rigid. "I know enough," she snaps, her tone daring him to argue. The crowd shifts, a teenage cashier glancing nervously at her manager, who hovers by the registers unsure. The moment stretches, heavy with unspoken histories. Marcus's fingers curl around the handle of his basket, the wicker creaking faintly. He thinks of his father, a retired mechanic whose hands still bear the scars of decades fixing engines, and his mother, a school teacher who taught him to meet hate with grace. Their voices echo in his mind, steadying him. Some truths linger, waiting to be unveiled. He could walk away, let Evelyn's words dissolve into the hum of the store, but something roots him here in this aisle under the harsh fluorescent lights. Evelyn's scorn is not new to Marcus. Westfield, for all its charm, carries undercurrents of prejudice. Sideways glances at church picnics. Muttered comments at the gas station. He's felt it since he was a ma, running through these streets, his laughter mingling with the summer breeze. But today Evelyn's words are louder, bolder, a public challenge that demands a response. Marcus's chest rises with a slow breath, his eyes flickering with a mix of hurt and resolve. He shifts his weight, grounding himself, the linoleum cool beneath his feet. A young woman in a red hoodie clutching a loaf of bread mutters under her breath, "Leave him alone." Her voice is soft, but it carries, drawing a nod from an older man nearby. The crowd's attention sharpens, their silence a canvas for what comes next. Marcus's gaze softens briefly, acknowledging the woman's courage, but returns to Evelyn. Her smirk falters just for a moment, as if sensing the shift in the air. She clutches her oranges tighter, her knuckles whitening. The store feels smaller now, the aisles closing in, the fluorescent lights casting long shadows. Marcus's heart beats steadily, each thud, a reminder of his place, his purpose. He thinks of his great-grandfather, a man who tilled Indiana soil under a sun that offered no mercy, and his grandfather who fought in wars only to return to a country that denied him a seat at the counter. Their strength flows through him, a quiet river beneath his calm exterior. Evelyn's voice breaks the silence again, thinner now. "This is my town," she says, her chin lifting. "Always has been." The claim is brittle, a shield against the growing unease in her eyes. Marcus tilts his head slightly, his expression unyielding. "Your town," he repeats, his tone measured, almost curious. The question lands softly, but it carries the weight of centuries. The crowd leans in their breaths, held sensing the storm gathering in Marcus's calm. The wicker basket in Marcus's hand feels heavier, a tangible link to this moment. It's more than a basket, it's a symbol of his right to be here, to shop, to exist. He sets it down deliberately, the faint thud echoing in the stillness. His eyes never leave Evelyn's, and in that gaze there's a promise this isn't over. The store hums with tension, the fluorescent lights buzzing faintly as if the building itself is holding its breath. Marcus's silence is his strength, a refusal to let Evelyn's hate define him. He stands taller, his shoulders squared, the denim jacket catching the light. The crowd watches, some with pity, others with admiration, all waiting for his next move. Evelyn's fingers tremble slightly, her oranges slipping in the mesh bag. She expected a fight, a retreat, anything but this quiet, unshakable presence. The teenage cashier, her name tag reading Lila, takes a step forward, then stops, her hands twisting nervously. The manager, a balding man in a polo shirt, hovers by the registers, his walkie-talkie crackling. No one moves to stop Evelyn, but no one defends her either. The community so tightly knit, frays at the edges, exposed by her words. Marcus feels their eyes, their expectations, but he holds his ground, rooted in the truth of who he is. The aisle lined with apples and cans becomes a stage, the fluorescent lights a spotlight. Marcus's voice, when it comes again, is soft but firm. "You think you know me," he says, each word deliberate. "But you don't." Evelyn's lips part, but no sound comes. The crowd's whispers fade, and for a moment there's only Marcus, Evelyn, and the weight of history between them. The fluorescent lights of Harper's Market buzz, faintly casting a sterile glow over the produce aisle where Marcus Jackson stands, his wicker basket resting on the linoleum. The air still crackles with the aftershock of Evelyn Harper's words. "Go back where you came from," and the crowd's uneasy silence wraps around Marcus like a heavy coat. His jaw remains tight, his dark eyes steady, but beneath his composed exterior, a quiet storm brews. Evelyn, her silver hair glinting under the lights, clutches her mesh bag of oranges, her smirk replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. She expected Marcus to crumble or lash out, but his calm defiance unsettles her, and the crowd senses it too. Marcus shifts his weight, his sneakers squeaking softly against the floor. The grocery list in his pocket, his mother's handwriting. A steady anchor brushes against his thigh. He thinks of her voice, warm and firm. "Hate wants your anger, Marcus. Don't give it." The memory steadies him, but the sting of Evelyn's racial venom lingers sharp as a blade. Around him, the store pulses with tension. Lila, the teenage cashier, hovers near the bananas, her hands twisting, while the manager, his walkie-talkie crackling, watches from a safe distance. The young woman in the red hoodie who muttered, "Leave him alone," clutches her bread tighter, her eyes darting between Marcus and Evelyn. Evelyn's voice cuts through again, thinner but no less venomous. "I said what I meant." She snaps, her glasses slipping slightly. "This town's no place for your kind." The words are a gauntlet thrown to provoke, to reclaim her dwindling authority. A murmur ripples through the crowd. Some gasp, others shift uncomfortably. An older man by the bananas, his flannel shirt tucked neatly, shakes his head but says nothing. The young mother with the stroller edges closer. Her toddler now silent, sensing the weight of the moment. Marcus's chest rises with a slow breath, his fingers flexing around the basket's handle. Some truths linger, waiting to be unveiled. He could walk away, let Evelyn's hate fester in the silence, but the eyes of the crowd, curious, pitying, expectant, hold him here. Westfield, with its tree-lined streets and Friday night football games, is his home, but it's also a place where prejudice hides in polite nods and whispered asides. Marcus has felt it before: the clerk who followed him through a hardware store, the neighbor who crossed the street to avoid him. But today, Evelyn's words are a public wound, and the crowd's silence is its own kind of betrayal. "Ma'am," Marcus says, his voice low but resonant, "you're wrong about me." The simplicity of his words carries a quiet power, like a stone dropped into still water. Evelyn's lips purse, her hands trembling, as she adjusts her cardigan. "Don't you talk back to me," she retorts, but her voice wavers, less certain now. The crowd leans in their breaths shallow, as if the store itself is holding its ground. Lila, the cashier, takes a tentative step forward, her name tag glinting. "He's not doing anything wrong," she says, her voice small but clear. Evelyn glares at her, but the interruption cracks her facade, and she turns back to Marcus, her eyes blazing. The aisle feels narrower now, the shelves of apples and canned goods closing in. Marcus sets his basket down again, the wicker creaking, a recurring gesture that grounds him. The basket, worn and sturdy, is more than a tool. It's a symbol of his right to be here, to claim this space. He straightens his denim jacket, catching the light, and his presence grows larger, filling the silence. "You don't get to decide who belongs," he says, his tone measured but firm. The words land softly, but they carry the weight of his history, his family's history, etched into the soil of this country. Evelyn's face flushes. Her orange is slipping further in the mesh bag. She steps closer, her voice rising. "I've lived here my whole life," she says, her chin trembling. "I know how things should be." The claim is desperate, a last grasp at control, but it only deepens the crowd's unease. The older man by the bananas finally speaks, his voice gruff. "That's enough, Evelyn." His words are soft, but they carry weight, a crack in the town's unspoken loyalty to one of its own. The young mother nods, her stroller creaking. As she moves closer, her eyes locked on Marcus, with a mix of admiration and guilt. Marcus's heart pounds, but his face remains calm, a mask of quiet strength. He thinks of his father, who once fixed a stranger's car on a rainy Indiana night, never asking for thanks, and his mother, who stayed late to tutor kids who reminded her of Marcus. Their lives, their sacrifices, are woven into his resolve. He could shout, could match Evelyn's venom with his own, but that's not the way. Not his way. The fluorescent lights hum their buzz, a faint echo of the tension filling the store. A new voice breaks in, sharp and nervous. "Let's all just calm down," the manager says, stepping forward. His polo shirt wrinkled, his walkie-talkie silent now. He glances at Marcus, then Evelyn, his hands raised in a futile gesture of peace. "No need for trouble." The words are meant to diffuse, but they feel hollow, sidestepping the truth of Evelyn's hate. Marcus's eyes flicker to the manager, a brief flash of disappointment crossing his face. "Trouble," he repeats, his voice soft but pointed. "She started this." The crowd stirs, their whispers growing louder. The young woman in the red hoodie steps forward, her bread now forgotten on a shelf. "He's right," she says, her voice shaking but firm. "She can't talk to him like that." Her courage ripples, drawing nods from others, a middle-aged man in a baseball cap, a woman with a cart full of diapers. The community, so quick to look away, begins to fracture its silence, giving way to something new. Evelyn's hands shake now, her oranges tumbling to the floor, rolling under a shelf. She bends to retrieve them, her movements jerky, her face flushed with a mix of anger and embarrassment. "You're all against me," she mutters, her voice barely audible. Marcus watches her, his expression softening for a moment, not with pity, but with understanding. He knows hate is heavy, a burden she carries alone. But he won't carry it for her. The store feels alive now, its rhythm shifting. The fluorescent lights cast long shadows, and Marcus's silhouette stretches across the linoleum, steady and unyielding. He picks up his basket, the wicker creaking once more, and takes a step back, creating space but not retreating. "This isn't about you," he says to Evelyn, his voice calm but resolute. "It's about what's right." The words hang in the air, a challenge to her, to the crowd, to the town itself. Lila, the cashier, wipes her hands on her apron, her eyes bright with something like pride. The manager shifts uncomfortably, his authority diminished. The crowd's murmurs grow, a mix of support and unease as they grapple with what they've witnessed. Marcus feels their eyes, their expectations, but he carries his own truth rooted deep. The basket in his hand, the list in his pocket, the history in his veins, they anchor him, a quiet strength that no one, not even Evelyn, can shake. The moment isn't over, but it's shifting, the tension coiling tighter. Marcus's calm is a beacon, drawing the crowd closer, even as Evelyn's defiance frays. The store, with its shelves of apples and cans, its buzzing lights and creaking carts, is no longer just a store. It's a crossroads, a place where truth and prejudice collide, and Marcus stands at its center, his silence louder than any shout. The linoleum floor of Harper's Market gleams under the relentless fluorescent lights, reflecting the tension that pulses through the produce aisle. Marcus Jackson stands, his wicker basket back in hand, its familiar creak a quiet anchor amidst the storm. Evelyn Harper, her silver hair slightly askew, grips her retrieved oranges, her face a mask of defiance tinged with unease. Her words, "At this town's no place for your kind," still echo a racial barb that has fractured the store's rhythm. The crowd, a mix of hesitant supporters and silent onlookers, watches Marcus, their eyes heavy with expectation. His calm, a steady flame holds the room, but beneath it, a deeper resolve simmers ready to surface. Marcus's dark eyes flicker to the crowd, catching the young woman in the red hoodie, her bread still abandoned on a shelf. Her nod, subtle but firm, bolsters him. Lila, the teenage cashier, lingers by the bananas, her apron twisted in her hands, while the manager, his polo shirt damp with nervous sweat, hovers uselessly. The older man by the bananas, his flannel shirt creased, shifts his weight, his earlier words. "That's enough," Evelyn hanging in the air. The young mother with the stroller clutches her toddler closer, her face a mix of guilt and admiration. The store, once a backdrop of routine, is now a stage, and Marcus feels the weight of every gaze. Evelyn's voice, brittle but sharp, breaks the silence. "You're causing a scene," she says, her glasses glinting as she adjusts them. "Just leave." The accusation is a desperate pivot, framing Marcus as the disruptor. Her hands tremble, the mesh bag of oranges sagging, but her chin lifts, clinging to her fading authority. The crowd stirs, a murmur of dissent rising. "She's the one causing trouble," the woman in the red hoodie mutters loud enough for others to hear. A middle-aged man in a baseball cap nods, his arms crossed, while the woman with the diaper cart whispers to her friend. The community's silence, once complicit, begins to crack. Marcus's jaw tightens, a faint pulse at his temple betraying the hurt her words carry. He thinks of his grandfather who returned from war to segregated diners, and his great-grandfather whose calloused hands broke Indiana's soil for a dream he'd never see. Their strength, their sacrifices pulse through him, steadying his breath. Some truths linger, waiting to be unveiled. He could lash out, let the anger he feels, hot and justified, spill over, but that's not his way. His mother's voice echoes, "Grace, Marcus, always grace." He shifts his basket to his other hand, the wicker creaking, a recurring motif that grounds him in this moment. Causing a scene, Marcus repeats, his voice low, deliberate, cutting through the buzz of the lights. "Ma'am, you spoke first." The words are simple, but they land with precision, exposing the truth of her aggression. Evelyn's face flushes, her lips parting as if to retort, but she falters, her eyes darting to the crowd. The manager steps forward, his walkie-talkie silent, his hands raised. "Let's all move along," he says, his voice weak, sidestepping the injustice. Marcus's eyes flicker to him, a flash of disappointment crossing his face. "Move along," he says softly, his tone laced with quiet reproach. "She's the one who needs to." The crowd's murmurs grow louder, a tide turning. Lila, the cashier, steps closer, her voice trembling but clear. "He's right. She can't just say that." Her courage, raw and unpolished, ripples through the aisle, drawing a nod from the older man in flannel. "Evelyn, you're out of line," he says, his gruff voice carrying weight. Evelyn's smirk vanishes, her hands shaking as she clutches her oranges. "You're all turning on me," she snaps, her voice rising, but it's hollow now, a plea disguised as anger. The crowd's support for Marcus, tentative at first, solidifies their whispers, becoming a chorus of dissent. The aisle feels smaller, the shelves of apples and cans pressing in the fluorescent lights, casting stark shadows. Marcus stands taller, his denim jacket catching the light, his presence a quiet force. He thinks of Westfield's history, its tidy streets, masking old wounds, red-lined neighborhoods, whispered slurs at town meetings. He's felt it all his life, the teacher who assumed he'd failed, the cop who trailed his car on a quiet night. Evelyn's words are just the loudest echo of a familiar tune, but today they've drawn a line he won't cross silently. A new voice, sharp and unsteady, cuts through. "This is ridiculous," says a woman in her 50s, her cart piled with frozen meals. "He's just shopping. Let him be." Her words, though hesitant, add to the growing tide. The young mother with the stroller speaks up, her voice soft but firm. "My son's watching. This isn't what I want him to see." Her toddler, clutching a toy, stares at Marcus wide-eyed, as if sensing the moment's gravity. Marcus meets the boy's gaze, a flicker of warmth crossing his face, a silent promise to show him something better. Evelyn's hands tremble violently now. An orange slipping to the floor, rolling under a shelf. She bends to retrieve it, her movements stiff, her face a patchwork of anger and shame. "I don't need this," she mutters, her voice barely audible. Marcus watches her, his expression softening, not with forgiveness, but with understanding. Hate is a heavy load and she's carrying it alone. He won't add to it, but he won't absolve her either. The store pulses with a new energy. The crowd's support for Marcus, a fragile but growing force. He sets his basket down again, the wicker creaking, a gesture that's become his anchor. "You don't know my story," he says to Evelyn, his voice steady, resonant, "but you're about to." The promise in his words hangs in the air, a foreshadowing of the truth he's preparing to unveil. The crowd leans in their breaths shallow, sensing the shift. Lila wipes her hands on her apron, her eyes bright with anticipation. The manager's sideline shifts uncomfortably, his authority irrelevant now. Marcus's heart pounds, but his face remains calm, a mask of quiet strength. He thinks of his father who once stopped to help a stranded driver in a storm, and his mother who taught him that words can build or break. Their lives, their lessons, are his foundation, and he stands on them now, unshaken. The fluorescent lights hum their buzz, a faint echo of the tension, coiling tighter. The aisle with its apples and mazes, its creaking carts and watchful eyes is a crucible, and Marcus is its center, his resolve hardening with every passing second. Evelyn's defiance frays her eyes, darting to the crowd, searching for an ally, but finding none. She clutches her oranges, her knuckles white, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You don't scare me," she says, but the words lack conviction, a final grasp at control. Marcus tilts his head, his expression unyielding. "I'm not trying to," he says, his tone soft but firm. "I'm just here, bah." The simplicity of his response, laced with quiet power, disarms her, and the crowd feels it, their support for Marcus growing bolder. The moment teeters the tension, a taut wire ready to snap. Marcus picks up his basket, the wicker creaking once more, and takes a step forward, not toward Evelyn, but toward the truth he's ready to share. The store with its buzzing lights and shifting shadows holds its breath, waiting for the revelation that will change everything. Marcus is calm as a beacon, his strength a quiet river, and the crowd, the community. The town itself stands on the edge of something new. The fluorescent lights of Harper's Market hum with a relentless buzz, casting sharp shadows across the produce aisle where Marcus Jackson stands, his wicker basket steady in his hand. The creak of its handle, a recurring echo, grounds him as the tension in the store reaches its peak. Evelyn Harper, her silver hair fraying from its pins, clutches her mesh bag of oranges, her face a patchwork of defiance and dawning shame. Her words, "Go back where you came from," have ignited a fire, and the crowd, once silent, now pulses with a mix of support and unease. Marcus's calm, a quiet force, holds the room, but his eyes burn with a truth ready to break free. The aisle is a crucible, the shelves of apples and cans closing in the air, thick with anticipation. Lila, the teenage cashier, stands by the bananas, her apron twisted, her eyes wide with admiration. The young woman in the red hoodie, her bread, long-forgotten, nods fiercely, while the older man in flannel, his arms crossed, watches Marcus with quiet respect. The young mother with the stroller grips her toddler's hand, her face etched with hope. The manager sideline fidgets with his walkie-talkie, his authority dissolved. The crowd's murmurs have softened their breaths, held sensing the moment's gravity. Evelyn's voice, now a brittle whisper, tries to reclaim control. "You're making a fool of yourself," and she says, her glasses slipping, her hands trembling. The accusation is weak, a final barb from a crumbling fortress. Marcus's jaw tightens, but his face remains composed, his dark eyes locking onto hers. Some truths linger, waiting to be unveiled. He sets his basket down, the wicker creaking, a deliberate gesture that silences the room. The fluorescent lights cast his silhouette long across the linoleum, a figure of quiet power under their harsh glare. "Fool," Marcus says, his voice low, resonant, cutting through the buzz. "Ma'am, let me tell you who I am." The words are a declaration, a door swinging open to a history Evelyn can't dismiss. The crowd leans in, their eyes fixed on him as he begins to speak, his tone steady but rich with emotion. "My great-grandfather was born in this state, worked fields he'd never owned, broke his back so his children could dream. His father was a slave, chain-sold, beaten, but he built the roads you walk on, the country you claim." Evelyn's lips part, but no sound comes. Her oranges slip further in the bag, her hands shaking violently. The crowd is transfixed, their whispers gone. The older man in flannel lowers his head, his eyes misty, while Lila wipes her palms on her apron, her breath catching. Marcus's voice grows stronger, each word a stone laid in a foundation of truth. "My grandfather fought in a war for this nation, risked his life overseas, only to come home to signs that said he wasn't welcome. But he stayed, believed in a promise this country didn't keep for him. The aisle feels alive, the fluorescent lights buzzing louder as if echoing Marcus's words. He steps forward, not toward Evelyn, but into the space her hate tried to deny him. My parents, he continues, his tone softening. They fought too. My mother taught kids, black-white doesn't matter to read to hope. My father fixed cars, helped strangers, never asked for thanks. And me. He pauses, his eyes sweeping the crowd, then returning to Evelyn. I'm here standing in this store because they paid for my place with sweat, blood, and grace. The room is silent, the weight of Marcus's words settling like dust after a storm. Evelyn's face crumples, her smirk gone, her eyes darting to the crowd for an ally, but finding none. The young woman in the red hoodie steps closer, her voice shaking but clear. That's right, she says. He belongs here. The older man in flannel nods, his voice gruff. More than some, Evelyn. The young mother speaks, her toddler clutching her hand. This is his home. The chorus of voices, once hesitant, rises, a tide of support that drowns Evelyn's defiance. Marcus's heart pounds, but his face remains calm, his denim jacket catching the light. He thinks of his family's legacy, their quiet strength woven into his bones. You told me to go back, he says to Evelyn, his voice steady, almost gentle. But I'm already home. This is my country, maybe more than it's yours, because my people built it, fought for it, died for it. The words are a revelation, a truth so raw it shifts the room's heart. Evelyn's hands tremble, an orange falling to the floor, rolling under a shelf. She doesn't bend to retrieve it, her body frozen, her face pale with shame. The crowd erupts in quiet affirmation, nods, murmurs, a slow clap from the man in the baseball cap. Lila's eyes shine with tears, her voice breaking as she calls out, "Thank you." The manager silent steps back, his walkie-talkie forgotten. The young mother wipes her eyes, her toddler staring at Marcus with wide, curious eyes. The store with its buzzing lights and creaking carts feels transformed, a space where truth has carved a new path. Evelyn's shoulders slump, her cardigan sagging, her glasses fogging slightly. I didn't mean... She starts, her voice a whisper, but she stops, unable to finish. Marcus meets her gaze, his expression softening, not with forgiveness, but with clarity. It's not about what you meant, he says gently. It's about what you said. The words are a mirror, forcing her to face the weight of her hate. She turns, her cart rattling as she shuffles toward the exit, her head low, her certainty shattered. The crowd parts for her, their silence a judgment louder than words. Marcus picks up his basket, the wicker creaking once more, a motif of resilience. He stands tall, his silhouette sharp under the fluorescent lights, his presence a quiet triumph. The crowd watches, some approaching to offer words of thanks, others standing in thoughtful silence. The young woman in the red hoodie places a hand on his arm, her voice soft. You didn't have to do that, but I'm glad you did. Marcus nods, a faint smile crossing his face. Sometimes you have to, he says, his tone warm but resolute. The store begins to stir, its rhythm returning, but it's different now, infused with a new awareness. Marcus moves toward the canned goods, his sneakers silent, his grocery list still tucked in his pocket. The fluorescent lights hum their buzz, softer now, as if the store itself is exhaling. The crowd disperses slowly, their faces changed, some inspired, others reflective, all carrying a piece of Marcus's truth. Evelyn's absence leaves a void, but it's one Marcus has filled with dignity, a quiet victory that resonates beyond the aisle. The moment lingers, a turning point that will ripple through Westfield. Marcus's words, his calm courage, have planted a seed, one that will grow in ways he can't yet see. The basket in his hand, the list in his pocket, the history in his veins, they are his anchors, his proof of belonging. The store with its apples and cans, its shadows and lights, is no longer just a store. It's a testament to the power of truth spoken boldly, a place where prejudice met its match in a man who refused to be diminished. The fluorescent lights of Harper's Market cast a softer glow. Now their relentless buzz fading into the background as the produce aisle settles into an uneasy calm. Marcus Jackson stands near the canned goods, his wicker basket in hand, its familiar creak, a quiet echo of the storm that has passed. Evelyn Harper is gone, her cart's rattle, fading toward the exit, her face pale with the weight of her shattered certainty. The crowd, once a tense mosaic of whispers and glances, begins to disperse their steps. Hesitant, their faces etched with reflection. Marcus's words, his powerful recounting of his family's legacy, linger in the air, a truth that has shifted the store's heart and planted a seed in Westfield's soul. Marcus moves slowly, his sneakers silent on the linoleum, his denim jacket catching the light. The grocery list in his pocket, his mother's handwriting. A steady tether brushes against his thigh. He pauses by the tomatoes, his fingers grazing a can, but his mind is elsewhere, replaying the moment. His heart beats steadily, a rhythm of quiet triumph, but there's a heaviness too, a recognition of the cost of standing tall. Some truths linger waiting to be unveiled, and today he's laid one bare not just for Evelyn, but for the crowd, the town himself. Lila, the teenage cashier, approaches cautiously. Her apron smooth, her eyes bright with something like awe. "Mr. Jackson," she says, her voice soft, "what you said. It was amazing." Marcus offers a faint smile, his gaze warm but tired. "Just Marcus, Lila," he says, "and thank you." She nods, lingering a moment before returning to her register, her steps lighter, as if his courage has lifted her too. The young woman in the red hoodie, her bread now retrieved, passes by, her voice low. "You changed something today," she says, her eyes meeting his. Marcus nods, the weight of her words settling deep. The older man in flannel, his bananas now in his cart, pauses nearby. "My dad fought in that war too," he says gruffly, his voice thick. "He'd have been proud of you." Marcus meets his gaze, a flicker of connection passing between them. "Means a lot," he says simply. The young mother with the stroller lingers at the aisle's end, her toddler clutching a toy truck. She doesn't speak, but her nod, slow and deliberate, carries gratitude, a silent promise to teach her son what she's witnessed. The crowd's support, once fragile, has solidified a community waking to its own conscience. The store hums back to life, carts creaking, scanners beeping, but it's different now, infused with a quiet awareness. Marcus finishes his shopping, his movements deliberate, each item, tomatoes, beans, a loaf of bread, a reclaiming of his place. At the checkout, Lila scans his items, her smile shy but genuine. "You're always welcome here," she says, her voice steady. Marcus nods, his expression softening. Appreciate that, he says, his tone warm, grounding. The exchange is small, but it carries the weight of what's changed, a bridge built in a single afternoon. Outside, the Indiana sun dips low, casting long shadows across the parking lot. Marcus loads his groceries into his truck, the bags rustling softly. He glances at Evelyn's car, still parked, her silhouette hunched over the steering wheel. For a moment, he considers approaching her, offering words to soften the sting, but he decides against it. Some lessons need time to root, and he's given her enough for today. He climbs into his truck, the engine rumbling to life, and drives toward home, the sunset painting the sky in hues of gold and amber. At his parents' house, Marcus sits at the kitchen table, the scent of chili simmering on the stove. His father, a retired mechanic with hands scarred from years of work, listens as Marcus recounts the day. His mother, a schoolteacher, with a gaze that sees through to the soul, sets a bowl before him, her hand brushing his shoulder. "You did right, son," his father says, his voice low, resonant. "Not just for you, but for all of us." His mother nods, her eyes glistening. "You planted a seed, Marcus. That's how change grows." Their words, simple but profound, anchor him, a reminder that his stand was never just his own. Across town, Evelyn sits alone at her dining table, a cup of tea untouched before her. Marcus's words replay in her mind, slaves, soldiers, dreamers, each one a chisel against the armor of her beliefs. She thinks of her grandchildren, their faces bright with a world she's only beginning to question. Doubt, unfamiliar and sharp, settles in her chest. She doesn't know if she'll see Marcus again, but if she does, she hopes she'll find the courage to speak differently, to listen. Change is slow, but it's begun a ripple from a single moment in a grocery store. In the days that follow, Westfield buzzes with the story of Harper's Market. Neighbors share it over coffee. Teachers weave it into lessons. Strangers approach Marcus with gratitude, their own stories of prejudice spilling free. His quiet stand has sparked conversations long avoided, a crack in the town's polite facade. Marcus doesn't seek the attention, but he carries it with grace, knowing his words have reached beyond the aisle, beyond the moment. The reflective closing comes now, a moment to sit with what's unfolded. In a nation built on second chances, Marcus's courage reminds us that dignity is a quiet force, stronger than hate, deeper than fear. His truth, spoken with grace, didn't just silence Evelyn. It woke a community, stirred a town, planted seeds that will grow in ways he may never see. Standing up doesn't always mean shouting. Sometimes it's a steady voice, a calm gaze, a story told with conviction. Marcus's victory wasn't revenge, but redemption, not just for himself, but for those who watched, who listened, who changed. In the fluorescent-lit aisles of our lives, where prejudice too often lingers, his example lights a path toward justice, toward understanding, toward a world where every basket, every list, every life claims its rightful place.